This is one of a series of videos on Nebraska's system of classifying and applying standards to its highways, roads, and streets. This video provides information on the NBCS standards, which is addressed in state law and also in the Rule and Regulation Title 428, Chapter 2. This includes a brief overview of minimum design standards and detailed presentations on construction standards, minimum maintenance standards, relaxation of standards, and standard compliance inspection procedures. More details on minimum design standards are presented in the videos following this one. This video also briefly addresses some other state and federal laws and regulations beyond Title 428 that need to be taken into account when designing and constructing highways, roads, and streets. First, some terminology and acronyms. NBCS is the Nebraska Board of Public Roads Classifications and Standards. It may also be called the Board of Public Roads or just the Board. NDOT is the Nebraska Department of Transportation. Standards refers to the NBCS standards including design, construction, maintenance, and relaxation of standards. MDS refers to the minimum design standards, which address only the design aspect of a work or project. Standards are often termed minimum, but realize there are maximums for super elevation and grade, and ranges for cross slopes. When we say minimum, sometimes it refers to all of those. NEB-REV-STAT refers to the Nebraska Revised Statutes. NAC is the Nebraska Administrative Code. These are regulations that have the force of law. The word highway in Nebraska law also refers to roads and streets. Highway means the entire width between the boundary limits of any street, road, avenue, boulevard, or way which is publicly maintained when any part is open to the use of the public for purposes of vehicular travel. 3R is short for resurfacing, restoration, and rehabilitation. For more details, see the video dedicated to 3R. FC is functional classification. CFR is the Code of Federal Regulations. AASHTO is the acronym for the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. Next is a brief overview of Section 1, the Minimum Design Standards. A standard can be defined as a level of quality or attainment, or an ideal or basis in terms of which something can be evaluated or judged. The NBCS expresses the level, ideal, or basis as attributes, mostly as key criteria, and sets values for each criteria depending on the general category, urban or rural, functional classification, and other factors. As it would be impractical to set standards for every design element or every situation that can be encountered, the NBCS selected only certain key criteria to include in the minimum design standards. These criteria have been shown to affect safe and efficient operation of highways, roads, and streets. The minimum design standards can be found online in two places: the Secretary of State's website under Rules and Regulations. It may be easiest to browse rules and regulations by agency. The agency to select is Transportation. Once you are in the Transportation list, select Title 428. The minimum design standards are in Chapter 2 of Title 428. Another place to find NBCS standards is the Nebraska DOT's website using either of the two web links shown at the bottom of the screen. The video following this one has more detailed information on the NBCS minimum design standards. Minimum design standards try to achieve safer designs, meet driver expectations, and improve the reliability of the highway, road, and street network. Standards are a primary means of achieving a high-quality product, although there is a lot more to designing a road or street than just meeting minimum standards. Standards are a way of benchmarking system-wide needs. And standards are required by authority by the federal government, the Nebraska legislature, and possibly local ordinances and laws as well. That concludes the brief overview on minimum design standards. For more detailed information, go to the next video in this series. The board understands that construction of highways, roads, and streets cannot always be completed with the accuracy that could be implied by the standards, and that construction methods often can achieve only substantial conformance to the design. There are various ways to measure the geometry of roads and streets, with some discretion in the selection of beginning and end points of any particular feature being measured. Compounding this is the fact that there are changes that occur over time, including natural effects of the environment and weather, and wear and tear caused by people and traffic. The board also acknowledges that there is quite often a lack of funding available to maintain or upgrade county roads and municipal streets. It is possible that a particular roadway after construction does not strictly conform to the standards at each and every road or street location. Such precision was not intended by the board. As long as it has not been done in bad faith, the board would likely not view such occurrences as improper, as a violation of the standards, or as evidence of negligence. If there is a clear and convincing showing that the county or municipality disregarded the standards, the board could interpret it as a failure to meet standards. The next screen provides information on Nebraska's minimum construction standards, which are covered in Section 2 of Chapter 2 on page 87. The Nebraska DOT 2017 Standard Specifications for Construction are required for highways, roads, and streets with functional classifications higher than local, or for any work or project on the National Highway System, or any project that is funded in part or entirely with federal funds, no matter what the functional classification is, and are advisory, that is, non-mandatory, for functional classifications local, scenic recreation local, minimum maintenance, and remote residential. Nebraska DOT's standard specifications for construction are online at the web link shown on the screen. You get to that web link as follows. From the NDOR home page under the Business Center tab, Contractor Information, then select the link called 2017 Standard Specifications for Construction. The regulation recognizes that a city or county may have its own standard construction specifications. It allows those specifications to be used on city streets and county roads in lieu of NDOT's 2017 Standard Specifications for Construction if those specifications are equivalent in quality to NDOT's 2017 Standard Specifications for Construction, and the work or project is not on the National Highway System. Lack of attention to good construction standards can lead to early failure of your facility, that is, a shortened life cycle. That concludes this discussion on Minimum Construction Standards, Title 428, Nebraska Administrative Code, Chapter 2, Section 2. The following screens provide information on Nebraska's minimum maintenance standards. These are covered in Section 3 of Chapter 2 on pages 88 through 91. Elements included in the minimum maintenance standards are a definition of maintenance on page 88, the limits of maintenance also on page 88, the limits being necessary to emphasize that activities beyond maintenance require the application of other standards, that is, the minimum design standards in Section 1. The paragraph at the bottom of page 89 mentions that operations which are extensive or costly should not be charged to maintenance, but to construction. Routine physical maintenance activities are listed on pages 88 through 91 for roadway surfaces, shoulders and side road approaches, roadside and drainage, and structures. Nebraska's minimum maintenance standards allows certain physical activities to be considered maintenance. Some examples are joint filling, mud jacking, cleaning out culverts, mowing, and tree trimming. The standard is to keep the highway, road, or street and all of its elements in a condition at or near its original standard or usefulness and safety. The state's minimum maintenance standards take precedence over any local policy that may indicate that no maintenance is necessary for a public road or street. Works or projects funded in part or entirely with federal funds may require signing an agreement to maintain the completed facility for the life of the project. It would be a good practice for cities and counties to establish clear maintenance policies. A policy indicating no maintenance would not meet the intent of state law or Title 428. The 2016 standards clarified that eliminating barriers to access for the disabled, as required by federal or state law, regulation, or guidance, does not by itself require the application of standards higher than minimum maintenance. The same goes for sidewalks and trails. That concludes this discussion on minimum maintenance standards, Title 428, Nebraska Administrative Code, Chapter 2, Section 3. In 2019, the legislature added a paragraph 7 to Statute 39-2113. It allows the NBCS to work in cooperation with the Nebraska DOT, counties, and municipalities to develop more flexibility in design and maintenance standards. It is referring to programs and strategies such as practical design or flexible design that focuses funding on the primary problem or need in constructing projects that will not meet all of the NBCS minimum design standards, but will provide substantial overall benefit at a reasonable cost to the public. Asset preservation or preventative maintenance that focuses on extending the life of assets as shown by benefit cost, cost effectiveness, best value, or life cycle analyses in determining the project approach and the overall benefit to the public. Context-sensitive design that considers the established needs and values of a community and balances safety while making needed improvements in a manner that fits the surroundings and provides overall benefit to the public. These programs must be set out in memorandums of understanding or guidance documents. In issuing such a document, the NBCS can potentially allow project pre-approval for all projects that conform to the agreed-upon program. The next several screens provide information on Nebraska's relaxation of standards requirements and process. These are addressed in Section 4 of Chapter 2, pages 92 to 94, including pages 94A and 94B. A relaxation of standards is a decision approved by the board for a requirement, value, or range of values in Title 428, Nebraska Administrative Code, Chapter 2, Procedures for Standards. It applies to Sections 1, 2, and 3 of Chapter 2, Design, Construction, and Maintenance Standards. Relaxation of standards is the term used in state statutes. It is the equivalent of a design exception, a terminology used by the federal government and others. To achieve a highway, road, or street design that is well balanced in terms of safety, operations, environmental impacts, and cost, it may not always be possible to meet standards. There is a wide variety of site-specific conditions and constraints that can be encountered. State law refers to a special hardship due to peculiar, special, or unique local situations. There can be many reasons for requesting a relaxation of standards. It may be severe impacts to the environment or something of historic or cultural value, or requiring acquisition of a lot of right-of-way. It could also be costs. A relaxation of standards can be requested by the Nebraska Department of Roads, a county, or a municipality, or for a road classified as scenic recreation by any other interested party if the party believes that the application of scenic recreation standards would defeat the purpose of the scenic recreation classification. Filing a request with the Secretary of the Board starts the process. The Secretary of the Board must set a hearing date for the request no later than 60 days after the filing of a request that is complete. The requirements of a complete submittal will be discussed later in this presentation. A notice confirming the date is provided to the requesting party at least 10 days prior to the hearing. As you look at the possibility of up to 60 days until the hearing, note that it is important to identify the need for a relaxation of standards request as soon as you possibly can, and then promptly submit it to the Secretary of the Board. That includes planning and designing a work or project. The need for a request should be determined as early in the design process as possible, hopefully in the preliminary engineering phase. At the hearing, the board can grant or deny the request in whole or in part, or continue the hearing to the next board meeting. The board's decision can be appealed. There are a minimum of 18 requirements in order to have a complete submission for a request for a relaxation of standards. These are listed starting at the bottom of page 92, subparts 1 through 18, ending on page 94. There are additional requirements on page 94 for the scenic recreation classification and for low water stream crossings and fords in parts B and C respectively. Whatever the board grants for a design standard, it becomes the minimum standard for that roadway segment or bridge until circumstances change. This could be a change of traffic patterns and volumes, a change of functional classification, and other reasons. Regarding design standards, Title 428, Nebraska Administrative Code, Chapter 2, Section 1, a relaxation of standards is required if a requirement or standard value or range cannot be met because of a special hardship. This applies to the minimum design standards, tables, and notes. In the notes for county roads and municipal street standards, on pages 47 through 54, the requirements and standard values are in bold font. Anything not in bold font is information and guidance, for which it would not be appropriate to request a relaxation of standards. A city or county must check with the local projects section of the Department of Roads for any federal aid project to see if a design exception is necessary in addition to a relaxation of standards. The penalty for not meeting standards is a 10% reduction in next year's Highway Allocation Fund distributions. If a work or project is funded in part or entirely using federal funds and does not meet standards, there is a risk of losing some or all of that federal funding. That concludes this discussion on relaxation of standards, Title 428, Nebraska Administrative Code, Chapter 2, Section 4. Nebraska Standard Compliance Inspection Procedures, Section 5 of Chapter 2, pages 95 to 96, allows the NBCS to check construction projects in accordance with State Statute 39-2122. In order to determine that minimum standards of design and construction are being met for any public highway, road, or street. This could be the result of a complaint or a request or just a random check. Inspections must be scheduled at least 60 days in advance, and the county or municipality must be notified 20 days prior to the scheduled inspection. A report is prepared within 3 working days following the inspection. The board must review standards compliance inspection reports within 60 days. This concludes the discussion on Standard Compliance Inspection Procedures, Title 428, Nebraska Administrative Code, Chapter 2, Section 5. There are other state and federal laws and regulations beyond Title 428 that need to be taken into account when designing and constructing highways, roads, and streets. The following slides list some of those laws and regulations. This screen shows some other laws that may apply, from the Clean Water Act to Endangered Species Act and so on. It is not a comprehensive list. Most of the laws shown here are federal, although for some there may be a corollary state law, such as right-of-way acquisition laws. Permits may be needed, such as Corps of Engineers permit or a floodplain permit. The Nebraska Engineers and Architects Act needs to be accounted for when designing and constructing public highways, roads, and streets. If a public works project involves the practice of engineering and exceeds a threshold dollar amount, it is a state law to have plans, specifications, and estimates prepared and construction observed by an engineer licensed in Nebraska. The practice of engineering is defined in State Statute 81-3421 as any service or creative work that requires engineering education, training, and experience in the application of special knowledge of the mathematical, physical, and engineering sciences. The services may include, but not be limited to, planning and providing studies, designs, drawings, specifications, and other technical submissions, and administering construction contracts. The threshold dollar amount is set every 5th year by the Nebraska Board of Engineers and Architects. Refer to State Statute 81-3445. The current threshold is $109,000. It is the complete amount of the project, design, right-of-way costs, construction, etc. This final segment is a short review of what was discussed in this video, with questions. When it comes time to answering a review question, you have the option of pausing the video before the answer is given. State law assigns which responsibility or responsibilities to the Nebraska Board of Public Roads Classifications and Standards. The possible answers are setting specific criteria for functional classification categories, hearing appeals of functional classification assignments, setting minimum standards of design, construction, and maintenance, and acting on relaxation of standards requests, or all of the above? The answer is all of the above. Question 1. Minimum maintenance standards do not apply beyond the curb or shoulder. True or false? The answer is false. Maintenance applies to all elements of a highway, road, or street, including surface, shoulders, roadsides, traffic control devices, structures, waterways, and drainage facilities. Question 2. Application of the Nebraska Department of Roads 2007 Standard Specifications for Construction, or specifications equivalent in quality, are required for a road or street classified as a collector. True or false? The answer is true. It is true for any functional classification above local, which means collector, other arterial, major arterial, expressway, and interstate. It may also apply to federal aid projects. Question 3. The Board of Engineers and Architects dollar threshold applies only to the estimated construction amount. True or false? The answer is false. The threshold amount, $109,000 as of December 2016, applies to the entire project cost, including but not limited to design, right-of-way acquisition costs, utility relocation costs, construction, and construction inspection costs. This video provided information on the NBCS standards, which is addressed in state law and also in the Rule and Regulation, Title 428, Chapter 2. This includes a brief overview of minimum design standards and detailed presentations on construction standards, minimum maintenance standards, relaxation of standards, and standard compliance inspection procedures. More details on minimum design standards are presented in the videos following this one. This video also briefly addressed some other state and federal laws and regulations beyond Title 428 that need to be taken into account when designing and constructing highways, roads, and streets.